The team was using SGI Onyx, hugely expensive silicone graphics machines, guessing at what the specs of Nintendo's new console might be and using a butchered Saturn controller to playtest. As it turned out, when they finally received the finished console, they weren't pleasantly relieved. Despite costing a fraction of the SD workstations, fortunately Nintendo had come good on most of its promises. The processor ended up being 3/4 of what they had told us, explained Steve. We had to cut the textures down by half. Unfortunate, but not a disaster, and they cope with the reduction in admirable retro fashion. A lot of Goldeneye is in black and white, admits Carl, rather surprisingly. RGB colour textures cost a lot more in terms of processing power. You could do double the resolution if you used the grayscale, so a lot was done like that. If I needed a bit of colour, I'd add it in the vertex. As their semi-colourful Bond world was taking shape on the small screen, the film it was based on was nearing completion. The team had received the script very early in development and visited the set at Leavesden Studios, housed in an old Rolls-Royce factory, half a dozen times. We had really good access, says Carl. We could walk in anywhere and photograph what we needed. After the first few visits, I realised we needed textures. I started taking photos of walls. Visiting the film set undoubtedly helped cement the game world in the minds of the team, but it also reminded Rare that the clock was ticking. While trying to release the game in tandem with the film had never been considered a viable proposition, the thought of it not appearing until the next Bond movie hit cinemas instilled an understandable sense of urgency. It's not your university project, Tim Stamper told us one day. As heads of Rare, the Stampers probably had to make a lot of excuses. That's what we have to do these days. Why isn't it out yet? Why is it crap? We never had to answer those. Perhaps the Stamper brothers' greatest contribution to GoldenEye was fending off such inquiries and allowing the team time to develop a 3D game in what were still uncharted waters. Being able to play Mario 64 on the new console was a key influence. When Mario arrived, it was clearly a step forward. Martin was obsessed with the collision detection, which was obviously doing it in 3D, and GoldenEye was essentially using a 2D method. And our story was only about shooting stuff. We needed other things. We started putting in objectives, like meeting people in a level, and back then involved some complicated AI. Finding Boris, guiding him through and making him decode something, that wasn't easy. Other levels, you could hear the barrel being scraped. Collect 5 arbitrary pieces and go here, but Mario had plenty of that shit, which is pretty boring. We punctuated it with stuff like go and blow this thing up, like the canisters at the end of Arkengeist. It's in the film that we could have just gone here and press X. Carl had built that into the background, but it wasn't going to explode. But wouldn't it be nice if it did? So the canisters became a major prop. And the explosion had to be big enough to mask you switching one object with another. But then, if it's a gas plant, shouldn't we have gas? We can't do fucking gas, but we have got fog. Maybe we could change the fog settings. Can we use that more than once? Maybe in the Egypt setting. For a game with more than its fair share of wanton destruction, the team became remarkably good at recycling. The radar on multiplayer mode is actually an oil drum texture, which explains the cloudiness on the right, and sometimes whole levels were created with the detritus they had to hand. As the engine got better, we were very good at reusing things. We decided we would do the meeting room from Moonraker, which I just loved. We couldn't do it round, that was just too expensive, but we did a square version and linked it with being under the shuttle. Dave said those chairs have got to fold down like in the film, so we did it with door code. I remember one chair always folded wrong, but it would have taken so much coding to get it right, but hey, leave it as a bug. The shuttle was made from reused satellite textures, and to make it take off, we used grenade explosions. That whole level was a big hack job, but it's one of the nicest looking. Goldeneye was always good at giving you the big picture, from the dramatic bungee jump down Bailamore Dam at the opening to find the shootout in the antenna cradle, but much of its enduring charm is in the detail. Bullet holes in glass, graceful forward rolls, hats being blown off heads, and the knocking knees of terrified scientists. Those are Duncan Botwood's knees, laughs Kyle. He wasn't a professional actor, he was just one of the team. There was only one big motion capture shoot, and we realised someone was going to surrender at some point. So it was, put your hands up and shake your knees. Then it would be, stand there and we'll push you over. I think we must have breached health and safety quite a lot. Duncan's line was, I had to die a million times for Goldeneye. There were plenty of times when we'd get him to close his eyes and he didn't know when he was going to be pushed. He went through a lot for the game. There was blood. It wasn't the only occasion when the nearest warm body was put to good use. Alongside the faces of Piers Brosnan, Robbie Coltrane et al., Bea Jones scanned in virtually all the staff at Rare. At the start of each level, 5 faces from the extensive collection are picked at random and plonked onto the bodies of your adversaries. All the development team are in there, and Carl remains rather proud of the manly scar added to his own mug. More cameos were to follow, explained Steve. There are a few monitors in the game. One has Dave in sunglasses and a Russian hat Carl had bought in Berlin. There's one with Mark in a bowler hat on a skateboard, and another has Carl doing a Python silly walk. We're just trying to make the monitors seem alive. A notable omission are the Stamper brothers, who declined the opportunity to have their faces featured in the game, perhaps wary of giving employees the chance to shoot their bosses at close range. But the brothers' faith in the project, protecting the team from outside interference, and giving them the space to produce the best game they possibly could, means they can hold their heads high. So many of the things that make Goldeneye special, the bonus Aztec and Egyptian levels, the AI that sees guards dashing for alarms, and the wonderful multiplayer modes, were the result of not having to rush out a project to meet a demoralising deadline. The reason it turned out so well is that no one was standing over you saying you don't need to do that, move on to the next bit. I was on the explosions for a month, and I didn't have someone telling me I had a week, and that was enough. If there had been, the game might have been out on time. But it wouldn't have been the game it turned out to be. The entire team flew out to E3 in 1997 to present a 99% complete version of Goldeneye, and while the game was well received, no one predicted the phenomenal success that followed. A staggering 8 million copies were sold worldwide, and it remains the biggest selling N64 game in the USA, outdoing Mario 64, Ocarina of Time and Mario Kart. Actually, I was concerned it wouldn't be able to compete with Turok, admits Kyle. That looked better and had a better frame rate, and dinosaurs. Laughter all round, and an appropriate juncture for the team to pick up their pads and revisit the game that marked their entry into the industry. As Steve plays through the opening level, memories are triggered like sticky mines. How Martin had done a 3D gun barrel that had to be dropped due to frame rate issues. How code had been written to let you drive the van, but it caused too many problems if you got the vehicle stuck in a dead end. How the unreachable island you can see far in the distance from atop the dam originally had a solitary guard patrolling it. How they had to label certain wall textures as floor so guards could see you, which meant they would occasionally leap out of bunkers inexplicably. At one point, we were going to have reloading done by the player unplugging and reinserting a rumble pack on the controller, remembers Steve. Nintendo weren't keen on that idea, and I think it might have affected the pacing a bit. So to the main event, a 10-minute deathmatch, and as our 4 agents trade headshots and insults, they start to reel off things Goldeneye pioneered. The sniper rifle, the gun disconnected from the camera, and civilian AI, the 3D explosions, the environment mapping. Look closely at the shiny surface and you'll notice a low-resolution reflection of your surroundings. Body-specific hit reactions with the tasty option of dual-wielding weapons. Didn't Halo 2 invent that 7 years later, chuckles Carl. The list goes on, yet more fundamentally, they prove that a story-driven first-person shooter, a genre previously confined to PCs, could triumph on a console. Countless others have followed, but Goldeneye remains a benchmark. And the winner, appropriately enough, Steve, the creator of the multiplayer mode, nicks it by a single kill. Then the defeated trio realise he's been playing as Objob, whose diminutive stature bestows a distinct advantage, and the room echoes with cries of cheat and demands for a rematch. Goldeneye still inflaming passions 10 years on.